The zippers sliced the courtroom open. My daughters spread her proof like tarot cards. I didn't object. I stood, and the judge slid my folder into the light. When the gavel hovered, she finally met my eyes. That's when she remembered who taught her the script. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Thomas Ridley. I'm 74 years old. And this is what really happened. She called them proof, evidence, neglect, coercion, mismanagement. Words dressed up in bold headers, highlighted passages, tidy staples, all the armor of legitimacy. Twisted truth wrapped in office supplies. She believed a printer could forge reality if the font was serious enough. There was a time I would have believed her. A time I would have folded at the sight of tears brimming at the edge of her voice on the phone. A time I would have signed whatever paper she placed in front of me, just to soothe her fears, just to prove I was a father who provided, protected, loved. That time was gone. Now I sat still, my hands folded loosely in my lap, the smooth grain of the defense table cool beneath my palms, my breath steady, my gaze fixed ahead. The judge peered over half-moon glasses, eyes narrowed, expression unreadable as stone. He nodded for her to proceed. "Your Honor," she began, her voice smooth as polished glass, clear enough to echo. "These documents outline a pattern. Over the last decade, my father has—" She stopped, not to breathe, to calculate, to sharpen the blade of her paws so that every ear bent toward her. Systematically manipulated our family's estate, coercing decisions, isolating me from inheritance matters, using his power of attorney to redirect assets under false pretenses. The words floated like smoke, curling into the rafters, staining the silence. A woman in the front row let out a breathy whisper of disbelief. The ripple spread, murmurs swelling before dying against the judge's glare. And just like that, she had them. Hooked. There was always something performative about a courtroom. The heavy wood, the spotlights, the way sound seemed staged to echo longer than it should. It was theater, whether those seated realized it or not. But this wasn't Netflix. This wasn't a drama she could cut to black and edit until the audience wept. This was federal, binding, unforgiving. She didn't see it. Not yet. Behind her, the suitcase remained open, its shadow cast across the floor like the open mouth of a grave. The next page flared under the fluorescence, its edges curling in the heat of too many bodies pressed together in one room. Fragile. Temporary. "Exhibit A," she said crisply, sliding the page forward. "A signed directive, dated 3 years ago, revoking all shared control over the family trust." The judge lifted the page with deliberate care. His eyebrows arched the slightest fraction, not surprise, but interest. And in that quiet moment, I nearly smiled. Because I knew that page, intimately. I'd seen it before, not from her hands, but from the notary who flagged it. A timestamp problem. The signature dated 2 days too late. Sloppy. Desperate. A forgery without finesse. She didn't know I'd seen the playbook. She thought I came here blind. She thought I was caught in her trap. She didn't know I had 2 months of preparation stacked behind me. She didn't know I wasn't the one testifying today. Her voice rang again, louder now, stronger, feeding off the silence she mistook for submission. "My father has wielded control over every decision," she declared, leaning forward on the podium. "My education, my medical access, even my wedding. Every time I asked questions, he dismissed me. 'It's not your concern,' he'd say, Gasps cracked from the right side of the gallery. The words fell like stones into still water, splashing ripples of judgment across the room. She leaned forward, and finally, her eyes sought mine. That was when I raised my head. Our gazes collided, not with fury, not with fear, but with recognition. A dance we had performed for years, the liar, the believer, the teacher, the student. Because she didn't just lie. She made people want to believe. That was always her gift. The charm in her voice, the quiver in her throat, the tears timed like rainfall on stage lights. Her tone softened. She angled her head just slightly. "Dad," she said. The words slipped into the room like a knife coated in honey. "If you won't speak, I will. And I'll do it with facts. Signed, notarized, witnessed." A few faces turned toward me, waiting for rebuttal. A cough, a scoff, any flicker of denial. I gave them nothing, because this wasn't my time to move. I shifted slightly, only enough to glance at my left. My attorney sat with quiet patience, hands folded over a thin manila folder. The folder hadn't been touched. It didn't need to be. Timing was everything. And this was her stage, her spotlight. "Your Honor," Alina pressed on, holding up another sheet with the flourish of a conjurer. "This is a joint asset reallocation from 2016, signed while my father was under the influence of post-surgical medication." The room buzzed, heads tilted. Some frowned, others nodded with sympathy. A bold stroke, painting me frail, vulnerable, incapable. She had even brought the discharge summary. Dosages circled in neon yellow. Theatrics disguised as documentation. But I knew the page she hadn't included. The rescission filed 48 hours after, backed by my estate attorney, co-signed by the board trustee. Filed properly, stamped, already submitted to this court, already reviewed by this judge. She didn't know. Not yet. Her case had holes, and she didn't see them bleeding. The suitcase closed with a firm thud, reverberating through the room. She stepped back from the podium, chin raised, eyes gleaming with a performer's certainty. Her finale. A mic drop, crafted for drama, as if this were a closing argument in a film. For a moment, even I wondered whether she believed herself. Perhaps she'd told the story so many times that it had calcified into truth in her own mind. That was the danger of lies. Repeat them enough, and even the liar forgets the original script. The judge cleared his throat, a dry rasp that carried weight. "Mr. Ridley," he said, "you are not required to testify at this point. But if you wish—" I rose slowly, carefully, every muscle deliberate. Not to speak, just to stand. Because power does not always come through words. Sometimes it comes through presence. The leather of my chair creaked as I straightened. My daughter's gaze faltered, her polished mask twitching at the edges. My attorney slid the manila folder across the polished surface of the defense table. The paper made a faint rasp as it moved. The judge's eyes followed. He gave a small nod. The folder would be opened in the next session. I caught the flicker in Alina's expression, the hesitation, the confusion tightening around her lips, the worry dimming the triumph in her eyes. She looked at that folder like it was a live bomb. She wasn't wrong, because inside were the same documents she paraded, each annotated, each timestamp highlighted, each forgery exposed in crisp red ink, and one more page she never thought she'd see again. The original. Signed, stamped, sealed, filed before hers. I eased back into my seat, the wooden bench sighing beneath me. and for the first time that morning, she faltered. Her eyes darted to the judge, then to the gallery. The whispers spread again, thin and curling like smoke through the air, creeping into ears and minds. I leaned forward, voice low, steady, carrying only far enough for her to hear. "You always were good at acting, Alina," I said, "but you forgot. I taught you the script." The perfume hit first. A sharp floral blend, too sweet, too rehearsed. Not the kind that drifts naturally when someone brushes past you in a hallway. This was deliberate, layered. The kind of fragrance you wear not to feel good, but to be noticed, to fill a space before your voice even does. It struck me the moment she entered the courtroom doors. Heavy at first, then unraveling in notes. Jasmine tangled with citrus, lavender folded with something powdery, almost metallic underneath. It was a smell that clung, unnatural in its persistence. The kind you associate with plastic flowers on a grave. Pretty on the surface, but hollow when you leaned in close. She walked in like she still owned the moment. Like yesterday hadn't happened. Shoulders squared, chin up, face schooled into calm. The suit, black again, fit her body like armor, every crease deliberate, every thread chosen for impact. But armor doesn't hide everything. Her steps betrayed her. Just slightly too quick. Just slightly too sharp against the polished floor, heels striking faster than her breath could steady. As if she hadn't heard the whispers, the ones that had curled through the gallery since the end of yesterday's session. As if she hadn't seen the late-night news ticker flashing across local TV screens. Ridley case in turmoil. Heiress's suit against father faces document dispute. She wore black like a mourner. But not for a person. For the truth. I didn't flinch when she glanced at me. Didn't blink when her hand smoothed the papers on her table, as though she were brushing away invisible dust. Dust, not lies. She wanted composure, wanted control. But her knuckles tightened just enough on the edges that the pages curled under her grip. The bailiff called the judge, and the gallery rose as one. The air stirred, perfume mixing with the stale breath of the room, with the polished oak's faint musk, with the faint tang of copier toner still clinging to the stacks of evidence. We stood. The judge entered, robes flowing, face carved with lines that spoke of years of men and women trying to sell him their version of truth. He didn't smile, didn't greet, just lowered himself into his seat, exhaled through his nose, and tapped his pen once on the bench. A sound soft enough to vanish, yet commanding all ears. Continuation of Case 46, B. Ridley versus Ridley. The clerk's monotone voice echoed, then died. No one spoke, not yet. The silence stretched, taut like a wire. The weight of it pressed against our chests, demanding patience. And in that silence, you could feel it. The shift. Yesterday, she had commanded the room. Theatrics, documents, speeches timed with gasps from the gallery. She was the protagonist of her own courtroom drama. But today the gallery studied her differently. Not as a heroine, not as a villain. Something worse. A specimen. A character under review. A performance with footnotes, its gloss chipped by yesterday's revelation. She leaned forward, lips parting, voice ready. "Your Honor, before we proceed..." But the judge raised a finger, stopping her mid-step. "Miss Ridley," he said, his tone flat, his pen still tapping. "I've reviewed the file submitted at the close of yesterday's session. There are discrepancies." That word. Heavy. Measured. A gavel without being struck. Her lawyer twitched beside her, shifting in his seat, mouth opening. But Alina cut in first, her voice tightening with just enough edge to mask the tremor underneath. With all respect, Your Honor, those documents weren't in the original discovery. I had no opportunity to. You had ample opportunity, the judge snapped, his tone clipped like scissors cutting through cloth. You submitted a suitcase of evidence. Now we're unpacking it. A quiet chuckle slid from somewhere in the gallery, quickly hushed. She didn't turn, but I saw her hand tighten around her pen, the faint tremor running through her knuckles, betraying what her face would not. The judge flipped a page, eyes narrowing. His words came slowly, deliberately, each syllable carrying weight. Furthermore, he said, there appears to be a signed, notarized amendment to the trust, dated 2 weeks before your version, with a second independent witness signature. The air stilled. The scent of her perfume seemed sharper. Suddenly, too sweet in a space now soured by silence. Her lawyer rose, half panicked. We would like to request time to review the authenticity of... It's already been verified. The judge cut him off, eyes flat. This isn't about authenticity. This is about contradiction. Now sit down. The words landed like a hammer, and that was when the color left her cheeks. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't need to. Because sometimes you don't push the pieces. You just wait for them to collapse. She was unraveling herself. That's the thing about stories built on half-truths. They hold under applause. They crumble under cross-examination. Her next move came fast. Desperate. I saw it in the way her breath caught, in the flash of calculation behind her eyes. She reached for another weapon. A printed email thread, stapled, headings bolded in red, words highlighted to scream accusation. Your Honor, she said, voice pitched just enough to rise above the murmur of the gallery. This email exchange between my father and the family estate attorney shows coercion. He pressured the legal team to backdate amendments. It's all here. The judge didn't even extend his hand. Is this the same thread your attorney failed to include in the prior filing? Yes, but... Then it's inadmissible for now. You'll need to file a motion. The words hit her like a wall. She stood there frozen, eyes darting, lips pressed too tightly together. And I watched it happen. The mask cracked. Panic flickered behind her eyes, stitched tightly behind composure. She was losing the narrative. The gallery saw it too. Shoulders shifted, heads leaned toward one another, whispers threading like smoke between benches. But Alina wasn't finished. She had always carried a backup plan. Even as a child, I remembered her dolls lined in neat rows, little scripts whispered under her breath, each one with its own secret betrayal, each scene rewritten until the outcome pleased her. She never liked endings she couldn't control. So she pivoted. Your Honor, I would like to call a witness. Her voice steadied. The wild card was coming out. The judge leaned back slightly, brow raised. Name? My uncle, Jonathan Wexler. The words rippled through the room. A murmur moved like a chill breeze across the gallery. I didn't turn. Didn't need to. I knew. Jonathan, my late wife's brother. A man who lived most of his life one step behind fortune, but always 5 steps ahead in manipulation. A man who could talk his way out of anything, or into anything, if the stakes promised reward. Of course she'd found him, Of course, she dangled promises, cash, attention, maybe leverage. Jonathan was a man who could be bought, if you knew the currency. He walked to the stand like it was a stage, not nervous, not hesitant, like an actor hitting his cue. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his lapel, and nodded to the judge with all the solemnity of a man receiving a medal. The clerk called, "State your full name." "Jonathan Albert Wexler," he replied, his voice steady, baritone, rehearsed. "And your relation to the plaintiff?" "I'm her uncle, and a longtime family confidant." Alina's lawyer rose, pacing with false casualness. "Mr. Wexler, did you witness any instances in which Mr. Ridley, your brother-in-law, exerted undue influence over financial decisions related to the estate?" Jonathan cleared his throat. His eyes slid across the room, grazing mine just for a fraction, before moving on. "Yes," he said. Simple, sharp. Lies usually are. And then he launched. A story spun in soft, paternal tones, about how I allegedly pressured my wife to rewrite the trust, how I supposedly convinced Alina her role wasn't necessary, how I weaponized grief after my wife's death to consolidate control, all without a single document, all without a single timestamp, just words, words coated in cousinly affection, in faux sorrow, in practiced restraint. I let it unfold. Let them think the corner was closing in on me, because every move they made was a breadcrumb, and every breadcrumb led exactly where I wanted them. The judge leaned forward slightly, pen stilled. "Mr. Ridley, would you like to respond?" I stood again, slowly, let the silence stretch, drew a breath, then spoke, calm and low. "No response needed at this time, Your Honor, but I will have a question for the witness, when appropriate." The judge gave a nod. Jonathan shifted in his seat, just slightly, a twitch of the shoulder. The faintest tell, because he knew I had seen the bluff. And soon, so would the court. The perfume still hung in the air, too sweet, too heavy. But now it didn't smell like victory. It smelled like fear. The typing started before the judge even spoke. A steady rhythm. Click, click, click. Pause. Click. The court clerk's fingers moved across the keys like a metronome. Every sound etched into record, every breath, every objection, every slowly crumbling lie. The cadence filled the silence like a heartbeat, mechanical, impartial, unstoppable. Outside, rain tapped faintly against the courthouse windows. A soft patter, like fingertips on glass. A rhythm that should have been calming, but instead threaded tension deeper. Because in here, the real storm brewed in silence. Alina hadn't looked at me since Jonathan stepped down. Not once. Her eyes stayed fixed on her own hands, fingers laced so tightly her knuckles were ghost white. She didn't wear perfume today. Yesterday, the air had been filled with her floral bravado. Today, it was gone, replaced by the sterile scent of old paper and human anxiety, the tang of sweat behind tailored wool. She knew what was coming. Everyone did, because the manila folder had been moved. Not by me, not by my attorney, but by the judge. He had placed it in front of him, deliberately, gently, as though setting down a loaded weapon. His voice broke the silence, neutral, careful. "Mr. Ridley, would you like to submit the next item?" I stood, slowly. My chair creaked, the sound carrying in the tense quiet. This time, my hands weren't empty. I handed over a sealed document. The paper was crisp, edges sharp, weight unmistakable. The wax seal caught the overhead light, gleaming like a mirror reflecting intent. "Case file addendum," my attorney said calmly, his tone smooth, practiced. "Filed 62 days ago. Motion for contradiction review. With supporting affidavit, timestamp metadata, and forensic document examination." A ripple moved through the gallery. Shifting bodies, leaning forward, the anticipation almost physical. The judge cracked the seal, flipped the first page. His eyes scanned, slowly, deliberately. His face unreadable. He read, and kept reading. Each second dragged. The clerk's typing slowed, waiting. The gallery leaned closer, breaths shallow. Alina's hand twitched once, her pen rolling against the table with a hollow clink. It took nearly a full minute before the judge lifted his head. "Included here," he said, voice even but heavier now, "is a notarized timeline of document edits, side-by-side comparisons of the plaintiff's submission versus the originally filed trust, file metadata extracted from cloud logs, and a third-party signature review." He turned another page. The rustle of paper felt louder than thunder. "And here," he continued, "a certified email trail from the estate's primary attorney, directly contradicting yesterday's witness testimony in full." The clerk's typing accelerated, faster, urgent, recording history as it unfolded. Alina's lawyer lurched to his feet. "Objection." The judge didn't look up. "On what grounds?" The lawyer faltered. His throat bobbed. "Surprise submission. My client has not—" "It was filed 2 months ago," the judge interrupted. His voice cut like a blade. "And served to your firm, which, as I see here—" He flipped back a page, tapping it once with his pen. "Was signed as received by your junior associate, Ms. Trell." The lawyer's face drained of color. That was the strike. Not dramatic, not loud. A quiet, surgical incision aimed straight at the heart of their paperwork. I glanced at Alina. Her hand hovered near her lips, one finger twitching. She wasn't used to silence that didn't serve her. When her voice came, it cracked faintly at the edges. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. But the judge pressed forward, his eyes now shifting back to me. "Mr. Ridley," he said, "do you wish to elaborate?" I let the silence stretch, took my time. Then, "My daughter presented this courtroom with a suitcase full of narratives," I said. My tone was low, steady. "I filed a single envelope, but unlike hers, mine doesn't rely on memory, it relies on record." The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. Because for the first time since this circus began, every ear listened. "All of the documents submitted yesterday," my attorney added, his voice sliding in with surgical precision, "were created using modified templates from a home office printer. Font inconsistencies, missing headers, and most damning, a mismatch in the digital signature embedded in the PDF metadata." He passed another sheet to the clerk. The paper whispered across the wood. "See here," he said, pointing. "The trust amendment she submitted? Created at 11:42 p.m., 2 weeks ago, on a free document editor that stamps version history into the file." He allowed himself the faintest smile. "She forgot to disable it." The judge's eyes didn't turn to her. They turned to Jonathan. "Mr. Wexler," the judge said slowly, his voice measured, "you testified that your brother-in-law coerced estate decisions in 2016. Are you aware that the document you referred to did not exist at that time? Jonathan's throat tightened. His hands shifted on his lap. It was my understanding. No. The judge's voice was sharp, final. That's not what you said. Silence swallowed the room, heavy, suffocating. And then the gavel lifted, just slightly, hovering. That sound, the wood shifting in the judge's hand, was enough to crack her. Alina stood, not smoothly, not with her courtroom poise, but sharply, jerked upright, rattled. "Your Honor," she blurted, her voice thinning, "I was told that version was official." That's the file I received." The judge's eyes narrowed. "From whom?" She froze. "From whom, Miss Ridley?" Her lips parted, closed, opened again. Nothing. And then she sat, hard, like a puppet with its strings cut. The gallery shifted, whispers hissed. The scent of fear spread faster than perfume ever could. The judge nodded once, his expression unreadable. Noted. Then he turned to me. "Anything else, Mr. Ridley?" "One more item, Your Honor." My attorney slid open a second folder. Inside, just 2 sheets of paper. One was a declaration of intent. The other was the pause clause, buried deep in the original trust agreement. A paragraph most would skim past, written in dense legalese so dry it read like dust, almost invisible, but not forgotten. "The clause states," I said, "that any attempt to alter or challenge the estate via fraudulent means results in immediate suspension of the challenger's disbursement rights." The judge arched an eyebrow. "And this was included in the version submitted 2 months ago?" "Yes," I answered. "Page 23, paragraph 6, line 2. The clerk flipped pages quickly, stopped, nodded. That was the trap. Not a blade meant to wound, not even a strike meant to punish, but a pause, a freeze, every cent, every share, every title, locked, until the dust cleared. Alina's eyes darted to her lawyer. His hands shook as he scrolled frantically through his tablet. She whispered something sharp. He whispered back. Both looked pale. Both knew. But whispers couldn't undo the judge's next words. "In light of this submission, the court will impose an immediate injunction on all disbursements relating to the Ridley estate, effective today." That was the moment. The moment her posture broke. The moment her eyes glossed, blinking faster, as though trying to hold back the realization drowning her. She had tried to bury me in ink. Instead, she had drowned in it. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke faintly across the courthouse steps, unseen through the windows, but felt in the air. Inside, the gavel had not yet fallen, but it hovered, and with it, the weight of truth. The silence before a witness speaks is never truly silent. It breathes, it tightens, it waits for a name. And when I said it, clearly, calmly, with no tremor in my voice, that silence finally snapped. "I'd like to call Audrey Penman to the stand." The air shifted instantly. Heads turned like weather vanes in a sudden gust. A few murmurs rose from the benches, low, confused, buzzing like bees against the varnished wood panels. Even Alina's lawyer blinked, fumbling through his neat stack of files as though a missing page might explain what he hadn't prepared for. But there was nothing there. Audrey wasn't in their script. She wasn't even in their story. But she was in mine. The heavy courtroom door opened with a groan that seemed louder than it should have been. Every head tilted toward it. No dramatic entrance, no echo of high heels striking the floor. Just a steady rhythm of soft shoes, practical, unhurried. And then, there she was, Audrey, a woman in her 60s, wearing a gray blazer that carried the faintest wrinkles of travel, a neat blouse beneath it. Her hair pulled back in a tidy knot at the base of her neck, streaked silver but firm. No jewelry except a small watch. She didn't dress for attention. She never had. Audrey had never needed attention, only accuracy. Her presence was quiet, almost understated, but it filled the room in its own way. She walked past Alina without even a glance. That indifference struck harder than a glare. For the first time since this trial began, my daughter's mask slipped, just a flicker, but real, a flash of unpreparedness. Audrey stepped up, raised her hand, swore the oath with crisp clarity. She lowered herself onto the witness chair, adjusted the microphone with careful fingers, and fixed her gaze directly on the judge. "State your name and relation to the case," the clerk prompted. Her voice was steady. "Audrey Penman. I'm a licensed paralegal and document specialist. I was employed by the Ridley Family Trust for over 12 years, directly under estate attorney Howard Lynn." The judge leaned slightly forward. "And why were you called today?" "To speak to the origin of the documents submitted by the plaintiff." A beat of silence, heavy, meaningful. And then I saw it. The flicker. Alina's jaw tightened, her lips pressing together in a line that trembled almost imperceptibly, because she remembered. Audrey had been there at the office, quiet, methodical, always filing, always watching. The kind of person you never notice until you realize she saw everything. And Alina had underestimated her. My attorney rose smoothly, handing Audrey a printed document encased in a transparent sleeve. She held it with care, her fingers precise, as if holding not just paper, but a fragile truth that others had tried to erase. "Ms. Penman," he said, his tone calm but purposeful, "do you recognize this version of the trust?" Audrey adjusted her glasses, studied the page, and gave a small nod. "Yes, I do. I printed it, sealed it, witnessed it. The original version filed in 2016. The words rang with certainty. The gallery shifted, whispers crawling between benches. "And this version?" my attorney asked, handing her Alina's exhibit. Audrey compared them. Her eyes scanned line by line, her finger brushing across the margins. She inhaled, then looked up, her tone clinical. "This is a modified scan. The body text is identical, but the footer is different. The embedded security tag was stripped out and replaced. I can confirm that, because I set up the secure document tracking system for the trust office myself." The air thickened. "Is it forged?" my attorney pressed. Audrey's answer was sharp. Not handwritten, but reconstructed, artificially aligned. A hamisag kihagias altal tortenik. The judge nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. But Audrey wasn't finished. "There's also a print log. Case 816B, she continued. That file was accessed 3 times from an unrecognized device, 2 weeks ago, which matches the exact timestamp on Ms. Ridley's submitted version. The sound was immediate, a buzz, low voices rippling, coats rustling, the gallery shifting uncomfortably as tension pressed down on every chest. Alina leaned hard toward her attorney, whispering fiercely. Her hands gripped her papers like lifelines. The judge's hand cut the air. "No sidebar," he said sharply. "We proceed." Her lawyer stood abruptly, his voice strained. "Your Honor, may we object to the admissibility of a witness who wasn't on the preliminary?" The judge's eyes cut through him. "You've objected already, and you've been overruled. Again." The lawyer sat, hard, his face flushed. Audrey didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She wasn't there for revenge. She was there for the record, for the truth that had been twisted into shadows. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Penman, why were you not contacted earlier in this process?" Audrey glanced briefly at me, then back at him. "I left the trust firm 2 years ago after a health scare. I moved states. It was only when Mr. Ridley contacted me last month that I reviewed the existing file backups. That's when I realized someone had built a shadow archive." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Shadow archive. The gallery murmured again, louder now. And Alina flinched, not outwardly dramatic, just a small shift. But I caught it, because she knew exactly what that meant. That folder on her encrypted drive, the one she thought only she had access to, was nothing more than a mirror, a reflection of something real, distorted. I had known for years she was preparing something, but even I hadn't expected her to take it this far alone. Jonathan, her lawyer, maybe others gave her confidence. But the arrogance? That was hers alone. And now it was cracking, because she stood, unprompted, abrupt. "I'd like to speak," she blurted, her voice too loud, edged sharp. The judge's eyes narrowed. "This is not your turn." But she didn't sit. "Everything I did," she started, voice rising, "was to protect what's right. My father." "You're advised not to continue," the judge warned, his tone steel. But Alina pushed forward, words spilling like a dam breaking. "He's manipulating the court. He's using his money, his contacts. He's always done this. My mother knew it. Jonathan knew it. I know it." The gallery stirred, eyes flicking between us. The judge's voice thundered, "Sit! Down!" But she didn't. And that was the collapse. Not a legal collapse, a personal one. Because in her desperation, she turned not to the judge, but to the gallery, her voice rising to a pitch just shy of breaking. "You all think this man is some noble old patriarch? He's not. He's a control freak, a tyrant. I was never allowed to make a single decision without hearing—" "Miss Ridley," the judge barked, his voice echoing like a gavel strike itself. "One more word, and I will have you held in contempt." The silence that followed was suffocating. She froze, her lips parted, but no sound came. The gavel didn't strike, not yet, but it hovered, close, waiting. The judge's gaze shifted to me, not with sympathy, not pity, but something harder, understanding. "Anything further, Mr. Ridley?" I rose. Audrey stepped down, her quiet footsteps carrying dignity that no one questioned. And I spoke, not to the gallery, not to the judge, to her. "I never expected perfection from you, Alina, only truth. And when you chose to rewrite it, you forgot something." Her eyes locked on mine, wide, shaken. "The truth always has witnesses." The words landed heavy. The courtroom didn't erupt. It inhaled, a collective breath drawn and held. A moment stretched thin, solid, final. The judge turned to the clerk, his tone calm, decisive. "Prepare the ruling for tomorrow, 9 a.m. And then the gavel fell, just once, sharp, final, and Alina sat, not in victory, not in grief, but in surrender. The crowd was already murmuring when we walked in, not loud, not angry, just restless, curious, waiting for the air to split, for the moment when everything would finally make sense. Verdict day in civil court doesn't usually draw this kind of attention. Most people don't pack a gallery for inheritance disputes. But word had spread. The whispers from yesterday had turned into headlines this morning. The courthouse steps were crowded with cameras before dawn. Local reporters filled the first 2 rows. A man with a podcast mic stood near the back, murmuring his commentary like a stage whisper. Even the court stenographer, usually the most invisible presence in the room, had arrived 10 minutes early, hunched over her machine, feeding in fresh ribbons, checking ink as if preparing for a marathon. Because whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be quiet. The room was packed shoulder to shoulder when I entered. The air buzzed, not with volume, but with tension, a restless stillness, the scrape of shoes on marble, the occasional cough swallowed quickly. Eyes darted toward the empty plaintiff's bench, waiting for her. Alina arrived last. No suitcase, no stack of carefully tabbed exhibits, just herself. She wore navy again, the same suit from day one, but now it seemed looser, slouching against her shoulders as though even the threads were tired of carrying her. Her hair was neat, her face painted with the same careful touch, but it couldn't disguise the exhaustion etched at the edges of her eyes. She didn't look at me, not once. The bailiff's voice cut through the anticipation like a knife. "All rise." The gallery scraped upward as one. The judge entered, robes trailing, steps measured. He didn't look to the gallery, didn't acknowledge the reporters, didn't need to. His authority filled the space the moment he crossed the threshold. "All may be seated." We sat. The gavel did not strike. Not yet. The judge's hands rested on a single folder, thin, unadorned, no mountain of papers, no binders, just that one quiet folder. His voice was even, deliberate. Case 46B. After thorough review of all submitted documentation, witness testimony, and the court's own examination of forensic evidence, a ruling will now be delivered. The gallery leaned forward. Reporters lifted pens. The podcast mic shifted closer. Alina's lawyer perched at the edge of his chair, eyes sharp. And me? I sat back. Because I already knew. The judge cleared his throat. His gaze swept the room, pausing just long enough on Alina to let the weight of it settle. "First," he said, "the court finds the documentation submitted by the plaintiff, Ms. Alina Ridley, to be materially altered. The inconsistencies, metadata conflicts, and forgery through omission have been verified by an independent specialist." He stopped there, letting it land. Alina closed her eyes, just for a second, but it was enough. "Therefore," the judge continued, "the court dismisses all claims made by the plaintiff in this case." The sound that followed was immediate. Whispers, gasps, the creak of benches as people leaned into each other, a murmur running through the gallery like a fuse sizzling toward fire. But the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he said, his tone tightening, "per the standing clause in the original trust agreement, all estate disbursements to Ms. Ridley are now suspended indefinitely. pending review by the trust's governing board. Her hands trembled visibly now, fingers curling into her lap. The words didn't just close the door on her case, they sealed it, bolted it shut, behind her. Lastly, the judge added, his voice sharp as steel, the witness, Mr. Jonathan Wexler, is referred to the bar review panel for potential perjury investigation, given the direct contradiction between his testimony and certified documents filed with this court. The gallery gasped louder this time. Chairs shifted. A few voices broke into hurried whispers. But Jonathan wasn't there to hear it. He'd fled the moment Audrey took the stand yesterday. Cowards rarely stay long enough to face the ruin they helped build. The judge tapped his pen once on the folder. Sharp, deliberate, final. Court is adjourned. And then, at last, the gavel fell. Once, twice. The sound echoed like thunder through the chamber. Final. The spell broke. Conversations erupted at once. Someone stood too fast, their chair scraping, their bag tipping over, papers spilling across the floor like a wave. A bailiff stepped forward to restore order, but the noise was no longer containable. Reporters scribbled. The podcast mic hissed with urgent whispers. And Alina. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't slam her hands down in protest. She just stood, slowly, stiffly, her face pale, frozen. It wasn't rage anymore. It was something worse. As if this room wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was a mirror. And for the first time she saw what she'd become. I rose, not fast, not triumphant, just steady. No speeches, no glares, no parting shots, just movement. I walked the aisle past the rows of watching eyes, past the murals of blindfolded justice painted high on the courthouse walls, past the benches worn smooth by decades of cases that ended much like this. Truth revealed, illusions undone. The marble floor gleamed under the light as I reached the hallway. And then, softly, faintly, "Dad." I turned. She stood alone, hands clasped in front of her, chin trembling, the suit that once made her look invincible now sagging like a costume at the end of a play. Her voice broke in half. I didn't know how to lose. For a moment, time folded back. For a moment I didn't see the plaintiff, the accuser, the architect of forged papers and broken trust. I saw the little girl who used to sit at the kitchen table, chewing her pencil as she tried to outsmart math homework. The teenager who slammed her bedroom door but pressed notes under it minutes later. The daughter who once called me safe. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw her. Not the performance, not the courtroom mask. Her. I nodded, my throat tight, but my words steady. Maybe now you'll learn. Her eyes flickered, wet at the corners, though no tears fell. I turned, and I walked away. Because revenge isn't always loud. It isn't always about shouting or triumph or standing over the rubble of the other side. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, seated in truth, and delivered with the sound of a zipper opening and a gavel falling. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.